Hey there, Eddie. It's great to look at your score, and I think you've got a lot of rich textural ideas in here. I'm just going to point out a few things just to be sure. Right here, you had talked about. I think you'd sent me a message about wanting to change tremolos to trills, and I don't have the original score right in front of me to check on that, but just to make sure that you meant 16th note tremolos, like a measured tremolo, as opposed to like an unmeasured tremolo, right? So it's da 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 as opposed to drrrr, right? So if you had wanted an unmeasured tremolo, you would want a three beam tremolo mark, right? Okay, so that was the first thing that stuck in my head. The second one is that you chose Celesta here, and I think that it would have been better for you to choose Glockenspiel. And the reason for that is that the Celesta is just really not a very loud instrument. Now, you can change that with a sound set, but live with an orchestra, it is just not going to sound right. So, like, you could have a xylophone player playing these octaves very easily, and I think it would work great on a standard glockenspiel with no problem. So, but the celesta is just really a mezzo piano kind of instrument. If you have big textures behind it, especially with brass involved, then you're just not going to hear the celesta at all. All right. Now, the third thing is, I want you to try this when after you listen to this, and that is go through your score and mark all of your dynamics for the brass down 1 degree compared to everybody else. Okay? So, for instance, here in the horns, you should mark so just mark pianissimo across here, horns, trombones, and tuba. And then right here, it's kind of interesting. You've got your melody marked down to piano, right? That is like the most important thing. Right? The melody should be the loudest thing, not the quietest thing, right? When you have accompanying elements that are marked at mezzo piano, right? So it should be really the other way around. But I would say it's okay to mark everybody mezzo piano and then just mark the brass piano, right? And then here, when you get here, I would say it's okay to mark the brass mezzo forte along with everybody else, and then down to piano, just like because the brass are involved as a melodic element. But like with the background element, like you've got here, you just really cannot hear the melody, and that is not just true in the mock-up, but it would be true live as well, right? Because the melody is you're giving so much attention to the harmonic, to the supportive elements of the melody that it's kind of overwhelming it, right? It's like excuse me, the harmonic. Sorry, it's a little early in the morning. The harmonic elements of the passage that it's overwhelming the melody. So yeah, one way that you can control some of that is just to not have the accompaniment swell so much, right? You can have the melody play bum 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 bum, and the accompaniment underneath can just be bum, and just not have to push as along with the melody, right? Just like you have here, right? You've got a little swell in the melody, but the accompaniment is staying level, right? Okay, so those were three things that sort of jumped out at me, and you notice that I've gotten rid of any unused bars or unused staves, like you had a percussion staff in here, which I just erased because it's not needed. Now, a couple other things. All right, just to teach you a few things that you're going to need. All right, so you notice that there are right in this bar, for instance, and in a few other places, the Yeah, right here, you can see those accidentals are crossing the bar line. So basically, just select the whole staff in some way, and then type Shift Command N or Shift Control N if you're on a PC, and that will justify everything horizontally. Okay, so that's just one possible fix, so that your score is really nice and readable and everything like that. All right. Now there were a few errors in the harmony in your scoring, and I'm not going to dwell on that. And in fact, if people are wondering why I have not pointed out errors in harmony, like, hey, that should have been an F, that should have been a G, whatever. I just really don't have time for that. And I figure that people who are watching can maybe point out an error or two in different chords, right? And it distracts from the whole purpose of the evaluation, which is to talk about the orchestration. Okay, so let's get back to that orchestration. So actually, like, the way that you scored things is pretty cool, but I would just point out a few things, right? So you've got your flutes, okay, and they're kind of climbing up, and then they reach a certain point and they jump back down again, sort of like the melody line of the violins actually has also a strange jump in it as well. Like there's it doesn't, like, this should be E an octave lower, right? But instead it's an octave higher, and then this should continue on, but then it jumps down to this B. So it's a bit jumbled in terms of like who is getting the melody in what place for what reason. And I mean, if that's intentional, then that's cool, but if it's just sort of a copy paste error or something like that, then watch out. I feel that this is not really possible, like, to play really softly and to reach for some very high notes on the clarinet. I think once you start getting up to like that F sharp, that E, I think that the clarinet's ability to sort of blend without sort of crying out a little, without sort of being very penetrating up there, is somewhat limited. I mean, you're better off with the flute, right? And I mean, it's cool the way that you're harmonizing and everything, but those are pretty high notes for the clarinet, at least to remain very soft and blended. Okay, now I mean, yeah, I would say like up to maybe, D and E is fine, but like you get up to F sharp and it's just pushing it a little bit. It's not impossible, but it just takes a lot of focus, and it also kind of goes against what the clarinet is about in that register. The clarinet is sort of supposed to be piercing in its upper clarina register. In fact, it's the name of that register is little trumpet, right? So it's just a little strange to be marking really high F sharps and to be in a softer dynamic. And it sort of, there's a bit of a fragmentation of the melody just in general across all of the melodic parts, right? And that is kind of taking away the focus. Now, in general, right, you are following kind of a breath pattern based on the piano to a degree, and then just trying to maybe judge how a wind player would be playing some of these things. But it's probably not a good idea to mark a slur across rests like this. Just try to be more simple in how some of this is stated. Like, this could just all be quarter notes. Do you know what I mean? The whole problem is that the player is going to stop anyways to respect the rest, right? They're going to, if they have to leave a rest here, then obviously they cannot slur everything across in one big breath. And here, like, you don't have a slur anyway, right? So maybe some some of these are copy paste errors. Like there's also right here, right? We've got some of that same thing happening. Now, as to the strings, what you have to understand is that the slurs are like represent how long the bow is going to be bowing before it turns around and changes direction, right? So, this is all one bow as you've scored it. So there's really no emphasis to this note, right? So it's like you're not going da da or da da da. Right? There just really is no life to this downbeat right here. Da, and then here you have. So it's just really, it feels like the slurring here, the bowing could have been worked out a little bit differently. That maybe this could have been slurred and then no slur, right? So you're going down, up, down, up, down, up, right? So just like I would just say shorter slurs are probably going to be more effective and also more expressive, right? Like adding it doesn't make music more expressive when you remove nuances and inflections and articulations. It makes it less expressive, right? There's a certain what they would call mellifluous quality to the music, but that's a different thing from being able to like land a downbeat in the right place to be able to push at an attack. Those are just like little subtle things, even in a soft phrase. So maybe study some more scores, especially just like string music, like maybe some of the string orchestra stuff by Mendelssohn and Dvorak, especially, and also Tchaikovsky's string serenade. I would just say check out. Those are really great models of bowing, right? And just really kind of teaches you about phrasing in a really complete way. Okay, so yeah, and here, Eddie, this is something I've mentioned in other evaluations, which I think you should try to watch, right? Everybody should be trying to watch each other's evaluations and really commenting on each other's scores. So far, I've not really put my foot down and said, look, this isn't fun for me if I'm the only person commenting on each other's scores. In the past, people have been very kind about when, say, like a collection of scores comes out, and like say everybody in the D group will try to comment on each other's work on the YouTube page, or maybe the Patreon, when I release all the Patreon entries for one level, like the people will try to comment on each other's scores and give each other some supportive feedback. And really there are only a few people who have really done that so far, and it kind of doesn't, it sort of sucks the fun out of it for me if I'm the only person commenting. It just it makes us a weaker community, I feel, if I'm the only voice. All right, so I just really appreciate it. So, but also watching each other's evaluations is a really important part of that. All right, so something that I've said several times is that slurred staccato shouldn't have a slur that goes onwards into an accent, right? You should just have the slur go this far. And because like right here, like what you're saying is, oh, there's a slur and then there's another slur in the second voice when the second voice already has a slur over it, right? So like when you get to this point, it's also meaningless for the second player and for the copyist. The copyist is wondering like, what do I do here? Right? So better to just back off this slur like this, right? That has more meaning. We cannot always follow the slurs that are in the original piano score, because those are slurs intended for that instrument, right? And so if you were going to do this, then I would say just like slur everybody, right? They should all have their own slurs. In fact, the second voice should get its own slur. Okay. All right, but let's not get too involved with that. So I've already talked a little bit about the thickness of the scoring in here, and it's actually pretty cool. It's just very thick, and it needs to back off a teeny little bit in terms of dynamics, right? And anytime you bring the trombones in, you get a very thick sound, right? You already have really lush strings, and that's cool, right? And I kind of like the way that you have more arching kinds of harmony in the strings, and you have more dense harmony in the winds. All right, now here you got two English horns, right? So that's really pretty much a rare thing. I would say you could reorchestrate this whole thing just having one English horn, right? And you could give the lower voice here to the second clarinet, or you could give the upper voice to the second oboe, and then have the lower voice be just the English horn, right? And then here you could give the lower voice to the bassoon, right? And then so there are a bunch of different fixes, so you could get rid of that extra voice for the English horn. But yeah, if you really wanted to get this ready for an orchestra to read it, then you would have to get rid of your extra English horn part, because not many orchestras could afford 4 oboe players for a reading. Okay, now going on, this is really cool. I like the motion that you've got in here, these offbeats in the lower winds. That's really, really cool. And I love the bass clarinet kind of holding down some of these lower notes alongside the lower heavy brass. I think it's cool also that you are kind of letting us know, you're taking pains to let us know when one voice, it's like when it's A2 or like a single player. Here, make sure when you say solo doesn't mean one player. It just means that this is a solo. So you would have to write one, like the number 1, period, space, solo, right? This is what you mean, I think. Right? All right, so you have to tell us which player is playing the solo. Right? That's the important thing. Now, back to the orchestration of this section here. If you... If this is going to be mezzo piano now, so because you have this sort of escalating kind of dynamics here, so piano, mezzo forte. This is going to be mezzo piano, and this is going to be glockenspiel. Then this doesn't need to be fortissimo. Like you obviously marking this fortissimo is a way of trying to get the playback to sound as loud as it needs to be, right? But if you have a glockenspiel, then you can just score that as mezzo forte or even as mezzo piano, and you'll get the right kind of sound out of it. All right, so treatment of the melody. So once again, we have this sort of strange thing where the violin is down and the winds are up. So that happened at the beginning too. Like the violin is sort of playing the lower octave, and then the flute and clarinet are dealing with the upper octave. So, I mean, this would have been a great place to sort of reverse that a little bit. Maybe the strings could take the upper octave, because it's the same tone color, right? We want to avoid using the same tone color all the time. So it's here you have octaves with oboes and flutes, and the violins are sort of, kind of supporting from behind a little bit, although you do have the dynamics kind of reversed there, right? So just watch out about using the same tone color for melodic expression all the time. All right, that's just a really important thing. I like the piccolo playing along with the celesta. That's kind of a cool idea. Now we're getting to bum, 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 and here we've got horns. That is all workable. I like that you got this little single note here on the trombones. That's kind of fun. And, I mean, this will all work, but once again, I I just feel that this is going to sort of stomp on your English horn parts. So maybe if you had more separation, see, I'm trying to not have you constantly underscore, sorry, to not constantly mark down the dynamic level. So it would be cool if the horns came out and played nice and loud. But what would even be cooler is if the horn parts and your oboe family parts didn't overlap at all, so that we could just really hear the difference between the timbres. Okay, but the way that it's scored right now, your English horn parts are definitely going to be buried by the horns. So it's better. You could fill in some of the harmonic positions with clarinet instead of English horn. Just get rid of the English horn if you wanted to, or score it higher so that it fills in below the oboes, and then just leave the horns where they are, or even just bring them down in the voicing by 1 degree. Okay, so bump, 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 bum, and yeah, this kind of glittering above. And then I really love this. This is such a cool idea. However, do you have 2 bass clarinets? Right? Bass clarinet and B flat. Now I'm seeing 2 parts here. So all is not lost, however, because this A sharp is perfectly playable on clarinet. Right? So you could just give this A sharp to the like this. You got which will be a written B here, and then just delete the second voice. Right, and then here delete the first voice. Yeah. All right, and then you've got, like, this will work way better, right? And then you've got your clarinet sound as well, right? Okay, but I really do like the trombone and the clarinets working together, kind of taking that middle voice. That is absolutely cool. All right, and then finally we've got our bum 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 bum, and pretty simple approach here. However, I do feel that the first violin should be the upper voice, right? Like right here, you've got the second violins as the upper voice. It should just switch, right? They're closer to the audience. They're more confident, and but like kind of curious right here whether or not this is intended to be divisi, right? You were pretty careful about marking divisi before, right? So maybe assuming this is divisi because you didn't really make a big change to this, right? This could have been marked unison and then divisi again. So yeah, divisi we're assuming, but yeah, just really give the upper part to the first violins unless you have some specific calculation that's involved, which I don't really see here. But yeah, so nice to do, like, getting 3-part harmony twice by skewing octaves across the strings. That's all fine, but you're just not going to get a balance the way things are scored, right? I would score this I would score the strings forte, all right? And then probably the winds as well, and then the brass could stay mezzo forte. And then everybody could cool down to piano in the winds and strings and pianissimo for the brass. And then you get a really beautiful balance. The ending here is very, very cool. Like some of these ideas, just you really have to think about using brass and winds together, especially when you have horns, which have a very penetrating sound, like in terms of their overtones. They really dominate the overtones of other instruments in a sort of a resonant way, kind of like the way that sort of makes your ear kind of twitch, that kind of way. So that strength can easily take a lot of the color out of other instruments. So you hear the force, you hear the presence of the other winds, but you don't really hear their unique colors anymore because it's just been kind of blocked out by the horns when you score them on top of each other like this, right? And I mean, there's some pretty good horn scoring just on its own here, and I like the way that you got it working with the trombones and everything like that, right? But I would just say in this case, maybe score your winds a little bit higher, right? And no, having said what I've said, there's no reason why the lower winds should not be working together to double some of the lower strings, or to play along with, say, like the tuba and the trombones, right? So, but anyway, but I mean, it's pretty cool, but it's just pretty close, right? The way that the winds and the horns are sort of sitting on top of each other. Okay, so that is my evaluation of this score, Eddie. And I think you did some great work, and I mean, considering everything else that is going on right now, then I really am so appreciative that you're able to find the time to spend on this. It really means a lot. I really do appreciate it, and I really appreciate your support of the channel on Patreon, and so it's just really, really great. I'm really happy to be looking at this score and helping you out, and hopefully some of my thoughts here will give you some ideas. And basically, I would just say, look, read some more scores, read some Ravel. You just need to be studying some more open types of orchestration, where the composers are giving less of a voice to all the instruments together, but like just more economically using them so that the colors spring out, right? Rather than them being mixed together, which is more of like a Brahms approach, or maybe Bruckner. Okay, so anyways, thanks for the great entry, and I will hopefully be able to evaluate most, or maybe even all, of the dotted semi-brev entries. So hang on for that. There will be more coming later today.